There is power in diversity. There is significance in inclusion. As a member-based organization with a diverse range of members that make up a variety of sectors, business sizes, and representations, we care about our community and the diverse voices that are an integral part of it. We know that to build and maintain a thriving business climate in our community, we must work hard, deliberately and collectively, to promote diversity and inclusion and make our businesses, workplaces, our neighborhoods a safe space. Hello and welcome to the Guelph Chamber of Commerce's new mini video series, Power in Diversity. My name is Shakiba Shayani and I am the CEO of the Guelph Chamber of Commerce. Our new Power in Diversity video series, in partnership with Sleeman Breweries and RBC Royal Bank, will provide businesses with critical thought leadership to help move the conversation on diversity and inclusion forward. We're excited to launch our first of 5 videos today. My conversations throughout our Power in Diversity series will include a range of topics and will focus on the importance of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I'm thrilled to welcome our first special guest to Power in Diversity, Kevin Sutton. Kevin Sutton is a writer, spoken word performance artist, workshop facilitator, communications professional, and community organizer. He is a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Guelph and hosts The Great Pause on CFRU 93.3. His experience working with at-risk youth has led him to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, helping organizations nurture supportive professional environments where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Shakiba. I did want to start with just talking about, I think, what is most important. And I think that is the land and the first peoples on whose land we are residing on. Right now we're on Anishinaabe land, and it is Treaty 3 between the Lakes Burgess, and it's stolen land. So I just want to make sure that we recognize that this is part of what we need to be recovering from, and to recognize that the harm that we've seen and we're aware of hasn't yet changed, and that just down the road from us at Six Nations, they are attempting to encroach upon Indigenous land even more, ignoring rule of law, ignoring conflicts of interest abound, and this is the behavior that we talk about that we're witnessing, and why land acknowledgements just aren't really enough anymore, and that really what this needs to be is a call to show up, right? A call to show up on on Six Nations, show up on 1492 Land Back Lane, and and support them. And if the rule of law, if the rule of that we're leaning behind, the way that we want to be together, which that's the the core of all principles, right? How do we want to be together? If we're going to adhere to that, then we have to treat Indigenous communities in the same way any other community would be treated, which is they have to be allowed to grow and thrive and say no to development on their front doorstep, right? Every other community gets that right. And if we're not giving that right to Indigenous communities, we are not living up to our charter, and we're not living up to the Ontario or Canadian Human Rights Commission's standards, right? So I think that's what's most important, is to remember that at the end of the day, when we figure out all of our sustainability and figure out how to survive climate change, we will arrive at what have been Indigenous wisdom systems for eons, right? And I think it's important to recognize that the people who have been on that land, the land defenders, have been there 10,000 years, and they should expect to be there 10,000 more. I think that is how it should be according to our own values. I'm going to get into, because I'm at my core a poet. I wanted to start us off with a little poem. Perfect. that I feel is a great way to kind of set our tone. It's called The Truth of Us. Mark Twain said, "It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." Could you let go of that idea that's kissing your neck, playing you like a former lover who just hasn't left yet? Now, you've been lying to each other and therefore everyone else, but you can't leave because it's become part of your concept of self. Are you still dancing with that old feeling you spoon? Clumsy steps to familiar wrong notes, auto-tune. Now you co-produce this remix so you get with the groove, but it's not the original sample that you first bought into. Could we release our cling wrap to that purchase? Because once we've marked it as territory and pissed on it, it's worthless. Trespassing views become targets to shoot, and if we're gunning for truth, why keep loading our verses? Could we refocus our purpose? Tears drip from the trigger's grip, slipping heavily to earth. What were you expecting? You were hoping it would hurt. Sometimes weighing rankers anchors like trying to lift a curse. But if it gave us better leverage, could we forgive first? In the face of defeat, could I say, go ahead and judge me? I'll just remove the eye daggers and tend to my injury. And could you decide to be loving no matter what I've got coming, and still accept my insides when I've decided to bleed? Could you accept me when I'm in need? Could we steep in the grief of a sobbing release, feel our guilt, find humility and peace on our knees, then rise up from our failings and embrace what we're seeing? Wipe the tears from these tired eyes and finally face being. Could we let go of this idea of how things are supposed to be and see these limitations as the source of our plea? I mean, why would things work your way if we are each free? And you may have just philosophies, but they're just philosophy. And we all have strategies to meet our needs. Could we let go of the parentheses around all of our theories and return to the source of the original query? Who are we? And who could we be? Would we make fewer enemies if we identified collectively? Feel your muscles relax with each judgment let go. Set your attention at ease by not pretending to know. Could that pain you feel just be a need to feel whole? So could the only control be self-control? So could we just let life unfold? Because we are each born without a clue to wield, and we will each die without that mystery revealed. Rumi said, beyond right and wrong, there's a wide open field. Could you meet me there? Could our wounds be healed? Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful and an excellent introduction. Thank you for situating us with all of that. That was great. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to jump into a couple of questions.
Sure.
So your work experience heavily supports diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I'd love to hear a little bit about your work and to understand from your perspective why promoting diversity and inclusion and equity in the workplace is so beneficial, not only to employers, but for employees.
Mm-hmm. It actually ends up becoming core to the needs of kind of world communities moving forward. Like moving forward in the way that we're moving, it's a requirement that we be able to recognize and honor and value difference, right? Because that is the global marketplace, right? And one of the core pieces of getting this particular piece right is that you actually create access to those markets, right? That's kind of on the business side of things. That is the core value. The deeper value is that the skills associated with creating supportive environments where differences are welcome and valued is that you grow through that breadth of perspectives. You end up creating much larger, your creativity is unbounded, basically. And the instances that people find when they get it right is that they tend to have far more success because they craft much more coherent decisions, from having a variety of voices at the table that can come from a variety of life experiences. Because one of the things that happens for folks who are marginalized is that they can tell the difference between somebody trying to tokenize them and when somebody is genuinely welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the goal is, because this is not prescriptive work. This is not technical work. Yes, there are Ontario Human Rights Commission standards, but this is also adaptive work, right? You're not going to be able to meet any of those legal standards unless you create an environment in which people feel supported, in which they feel welcome as they are, where they don't have to conform to a norm that is systemically oppressive of their life experiences. Mm. So that's why when I do this work with organizations. And yes, for every type of organization, from professional organizations, community benefit organizations, private companies, youth groups, parent councils, like anybody who gathers together really needs to be able to have the skill sets required to welcome people of difference. Right? It's core. And not just from kind of you want to talk carrot stick, not just because of the Ontario Human Rights Commission standards, but also because when you're trying to get that whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, what you're doing is you're building strong relationships. So the skill sets involved are about building relationships. You're not going to be able to look at a book and say, here's how you treat a black female trans person, right? You're not going to find a book that describes that and then be able to apply that to a living, breathing human being in front of you. You have to get to know who that person is and be able to have skills that allow for you to drop your preconceived bias in order to welcome in new information and build a trust relationship with that person. Something that's real and genuine that you both feel the outcome of, right? And if we think about it, that's all business is. It's a series of relationships, right? So when you build those skill sets to be able to welcome difference, you broaden your business capacity. You literally broaden it, right? But not only that, it stops being business and it starts becoming family, life, sustenance. It starts becoming something bigger and broader and deeper. You start to be creating outcomes. Now you're talking about legacy, right? Because here's where we are. We're on the brink of monumental change, and that monumental change can go in any number of directions, right? And the capacity to be able to navigate that change, that capacity is the same capacity that you need to be able to do the behavior change involved in genuinely bringing a supportive environment to your workplace, right? The skill sets are the same of navigating change. You're going to need emotional resilience to be able to have difficult conversations. You're going to need emotional intelligence to notice inequities in your workplace and take care of them without anybody having to tell you so, or to be able to bring up conversations where you think there might be issues and how you navigate those processes, right? And those are the same things you have to do with clients, with funders, with like in any number of directions. These skills apply, right? It's just about applying them to being able to welcome anybody, welcome literally everybody, right? That's kind of the goal, and that's why with Threshold, my kind of tagline is thriving with change, right? It's the ability to be able to thrive with change and difference. And when you have those skill sets, then moving into a time of monumental shift puts you at the vanguard, right? People getting buried by the wave and you're surfing it because you're accustomed to it, right? You have the skill sets, you have the organizational capacity to navigate it, right? And not be locked into any formal structures that are inherently organizationally limited, right? Because that's the thing that happens when you're not engaged in these types of practices, right? It's literally self-limiting. You have limited your audience. You have limited your market. You have limited your engagement with the world. And when you broaden that, you also are creating what? Like a very secure base as well. And not only that, in these times, you're also providing a beacon of hope and light moving forward. You're giving the example, you're growing the example. You know, it may be your organization that makes a whole bunch of mistakes that people end up learning from, right? But all of us are going to make mistakes in that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the place we've arrived at is 500 years in the making. It's 7 to 10 generations of socialized behaviors that are entirely oriented around exploiting slavery, genocide, and land theft
Mm-hmm.
to make money. To make money for very specific people. Our entire system of democracy, our entire judicial system, our entire economic system is explicitly designed to favor the exploitation of land, people, in its entire and nature, all of it. And we're all socialized in that. We've all grown up in that. We've all accepted norms of that. And in that, in those that place of socialized behavior, when we're asking for behavior change from somebody, it has to be something that we have to recognize it's going to take time, right? Like you can't expect to like, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a session with you, and everything's fixed. No, that's not how it works, right? I mean, I think I really like to compare it to the addiction model, the recovering from addiction model, where the very first step is simply admitting there's a problem, right? If you can't admit there's a problem, nothing changes, right? So, and that like, from that poem, that's the thing, right? Like what Mark Twain's quote, it's usually when you know something for sure that you're most in trouble, right? And
Absolutely.
right, and if you think about it, you cannot engage in critical thought from a fixed ideological position. It's impossible. You can't. You have to be able to let go of your sacred cows to be able to actually learn and grow with the depth required to navigate the systemic change that is coming, right? And whether that change is technological and the landscape changes, whether that change is climate, whether that change is future pandemics, like an ongoing cascade of them, whatever that future might be, being able to navigate that is a skill set that has to be learned, and that's something that happens over time.
And I mean, that's such a great segue into figuring out what is needed for businesses to shift that mindset. Like you've said, the first step is an acknowledgement that there's a need to do so. And I'm curious, if you have examples or thoughts about once that you identify the authentic reasons for your organization, for your workforce, for yourself, about why it's important to shift that perspective and broaden your horizons. What's possible when we are trying to improve how we treat our employees, our customers, when we want to be more respectful and insist on more providing more dignity to others.
Really, it comes down to land. Again, it comes down to land. It comes down to our connection with land. A lot of, because that's what's real, right? Let's be honest, that's what's real. What's real is the food we grow out of the ground. We can have all the ideas we want, but once they hit the ground, once they hit that ecology, once they hit that, which is all that a market is. A market is just another kind of ecology, right? And is it a healthy ecology that's in line with the land, or is it a separate kind of fantasy ecology that is actually harmful because you're not paying attention to what the feedback that's happening to you and engaging in critical thought about what's actually happening around you?
I mean,
right?
Are you talking literally like supply chain?
All of it is ecology, right? So everything from your supply chain all the way up. And I think it's really about what our relationship with land is. And I think that like one of the things that happens in the way that we get stuck in our ideologies or the ways that we think is that we lose that connection, right? It's our sense of kind of our own indigeneity, our own belongingness to Earth, belongingness to this world, to this biosphere, right? Is at the core of a lot of our discontent, right? At the core of a lot of the things we're trying to solve with capitalism for ourselves, the feelings we're trying to give ourselves. We used to get that from the land, right? And if we're going to kind of make it past a climate crisis, we're going to be able to kind of navigate our way through something like that. That has to be at the core. right? And when you recognize that that's at the core, you then recognize that indigenous knowledge systems are also the basis, right? When you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of years of wisdom of doing exactly that, right at your doorstep, right at your doorstep.
Right.
And I feel that's our starting place, right? And when I've talked to indigenous leaders, with everything that's been experienced by indigenous peoples, the thing that most often hear is, how do we come to the table as kin? How do we sit around the hearth as kin? How do we get there? That's for me, that's the feeling I get at the heart of all of the indigenous knowledge systems that I arrive at, is how do we come together? How do we want to be together? And if we're here together in this ecology, in this place that we're so interlinked, and we're so interlinked with the land, how should we be? And that's the ultimate underlying question behind all of the work that we're doing. And I think it is the underlying work in doing any kind of responsible business going forward.
I mean, it really does sound like, and I think both of us have used the word around collective or collaborative. I think it's not about trying to do it on your own. It's bring your people together, your leaders, and ask hard questions of each other, your work, the environment, both physical and emotional. Any other examples? Yeah, no, go ahead.
What I would say to that is, yes, when it's a coming together, and yes, hard questions will come. But it's more about being with each other. How do we want to be together? Because literally that's the question you ask when you're starting your business, right? Your purpose statement, your mission statement, of that vision, all of those things that you're crafting. How do we want to be together? And what's our purpose here? And how are we going to get there, right? Because I will say that you can create any formal structures you want. Your structures will inevitably end up being the relationships in your organization. It'll end up being the literal relationships between people. And cultivating those skill sets that allow for you to cultivate healthy relationships with the people in your organization, the people in your community, especially people of difference. That is when you start to be able to bring people in to an environment that is welcoming and supportive, right? And in a supportive environment, you're not expecting that everybody's going to be perfect, right? Because that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to be perfect. But the supportive environment is one where you can make mistakes. Right? But you can also make those mistakes knowing that here's our process. We know this is going to happen. Here's how we become accountable to those mistakes. Here's how we repair the relationships we might have harmed. Right? And those are kind of things you build in. And I've worked with organizations, like right now I'm working with a few organizations who are doing that work from the ground up. And it does come back to, how do we establish our values? And it really and there's a process between establishing your values and then kind of addressing these core things again of, how am I with myself, right? How am I with other people? How am I with my tasks, the things that I'm doing, right? And when I'm engaging in those things, how aligned am I with these things that I feel like I deeply believe, right? And like that's your starting place, right? And when you are invested in being able to bring people together, when you're really invested in trying to create that kind of way forward or that future, and you really kind of, or you just want to be able to be on that wave with the purpose that you have, this is where it starts. It starts at reimagining from the ground up, because we have all built our biases into the way that we behave in the world. It's just the way that humans are wired, and that is going to be a slow process over time. But when we build our organizations from those deep values, when we build those organizations from a feeling we get when we're connected to the land, when we build from there, our foundation is solid, and we can know that we will build in a process of being accountable to our vision.
That's awesome. A thoughtful foundation, I think we can all wrap our heads around that, is key. And I think you've really just hit the nail on the head about what's required to genuinely start that process and to be thoughtful and open to the experience of creating diverse and inclusive, equitable, and environments of belonging in workplace.
I just want to touch on one last thing, because you just mentioned it.
Yes.
You spoke about creating those environments. We have to remember creativity is such an essential part of it, right? creativity allows for us to connect to those centers in very, very profound ways, and that we should be enlivening our creativity when we craft these things. The organizations I'm working with, they're having a blast, right? They're having a blast doing this work, right? They're connecting to their vision and they're creating new ways of moving forward. It's exciting and innovative and on the edge of everything they want to be, right? And it's a creative endeavor that I think that's a really important piece of it, that artfulness to creating a way forward.
I love that. That's a good reminder that it's hard work, and sometimes it can be somber work, but it can also be exciting work and invigorating work and beautiful work too. So thanks for that reminder. Kevin, thank you for your wonderful insights. I really feel like we've only scratched the surface, but I really appreciate this. Feels like an excellent way to launch into the continued conversations we plan to have. I want to let our audience know that if you'd like to reach out to Kevin to retain him as a workshop facilitator or to help you work through the things that he's talking about, please feel free to connect with us at the Chamber, and we'll help facilitate that connection. Again, Kevin, I really appreciate from the bottom of my heart everything that you're doing for our community to ensure supportive, professional environments where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. I want to thank everyone who tuned into this and say thank you for doing so and supporting our Power and Diversity video series. I have to thank our sponsor, Sleeman Breweries, for their support in this project. Sleeman Breweries is committed to developing a diversity strategy and laying out a plan for how they will be a more diverse and resilient company. Their strategy and plan need to encourage open and honest dialogue, place value on the best ideas, skills, and experiences that all employees bring to the company. I encourage you to read the message from the sponsor below. And I'd also like to thank RBC Royal Bank for supporting this series. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to continuing these conversations to ensure that we all continue to learn, unlearn, and support one another to create a welcoming, safe, and diverse community. Thanks, everybody.